Since the Russian attack of Ukraine in 2022, the media has repeatedly written about Western-sourced weapons flowing into Ukraine. Most of the articles written so far have been about two anti-tank systems, the US Javelin and the Swedish/British NLAW. So which one is better, and just how suitable are they for the job at hand in Ukraine? Let's find out. Today's anti-tank weapons still owe a lot to various bazookas of the Second World War. And would you know it, this video is sponsored by Call of War, a free online World War II themed strategy game. In it you pick a real country and lead it during the Second World War. You fight up to 100 other players in real time, but the pace is nice and slow. I can give out some orders, then go about my business and check out what's going on with my country in the evening. The games can take weeks to complete, which suits me just fine. You can play it with the same account on both PC and mobile devices. And Binko viewers can get a special gift. Click on the link in the description and you'll get 13,000 gold and 1 month of premium subscription for free. That offer is available for 30 days only, so don't lose time. While sometimes the two systems are portrayed as competitors, in reality they're not. Each is designed to excel in a different set of conditions. In a way, they complement each other quite well. It's no wonder that the British military uses both Javelin and NLAW. They're both quite capable of defeating tanks, of course. But while the Javelin is an ATGM, the NLAW is not. It's simply not guided in a traditional sense of that word. That's because the NLAW was made to be a short-ranged, fairly cheap anti-tank weapon. When development cost is excluded and the cost is adjusted for inflation and number of units ordered, one NLAW cost the British around $27,000 today. Of course, smaller orders to other foreign users may yield higher prices, but Britain was the original user. While said price is still more than your average car and eclipses price-wise a simpler anti-tank weapon such as the AT-4, it's also still much cheaper than a Javelin missile. While the NLAW, AT-4 and such are disposable one-time use systems, the Javelin has a high-tech targeting unit and a missile launcher unit. The Javelin missile comes sealed in a one-time launcher tube, but the targeting unit can be reused dozens of times. It does require replacement batteries. In practice though, most countries order several missiles per targeting unit, and export prices are always a bit higher. So roughly speaking, a single Javelin is 10 times more expensive than one NLAW, while the NLAW is roughly 6 times more expensive than a simple anti-armor weapon like the AT-4. But what does each of those bring to the table? An AT-4 is completely unguided. A soldier takes aim and hopes for the best. A stationary target may be hit out to 330 yards, if visibility is good. Against a moving target, that range will drop by a factor of 2 or 3. The projectile is fairly fast initially, but since it's not powered, its velocity drops over time. But the whole system is light, easy to use, and anyone can quickly learn the basics. It's not really a good anti-tank weapon though, not just because of its short range, but because its warhead can't penetrate armor equivalent to more than 500 mm of steel. Today's tanks offer 1000 mm equivalents from the front against heat warheads, and even from the sides, some newer tanks will offer armor equivalent to a little over 500 mm of steel in certain areas, like the center of the turret or the frontal third of the hull side. A simple system like the AT-4 is best used as an infantry support weapon. Against tanks, it's lacking as the operator may get shot before he manages to disable the target. The NLAW is definitely a step up from the AT-4. It's more complex and heavier, weighing at almost 30 pounds. It's custom designed to engage well-armored targets. Its projectile has a rocket motor which keeps its velocity throughout most of its run. The motor and stabilization system make sure the projectile will fly straight towards the target. So even if a vehicle is 800 yards away and stationary, a hit is still advertised as likely. There's really not much more training required to use the NLAW, which is why it was a good choice to be sent to Ukraine, as troops could learn to use it effectively in no time. Even though the projectile itself has no seeker, the NLAW still offers a bit more precision against moving targets. Its internal systems make sure the projectile flies along a predetermined path. Against a moving target, it's a line adjusted for the predicted position of the target. Basically, the operator selects the tracking mode and keeps the target vehicle in its sight for up to 3 seconds. So if the vehicle is moving, the operator will be moving the sights as well, even if just a little bit. Those movements will be calculated into adjustment of the actual rocket's trajectory. Basically, the targeting system tries to calculate where the vehicle will be, assuming it doesn't change speed or direction. Since those two factors can indeed change, NLAW's effective range against moving vehicles is usually quoted to be up to 400 meters. Better than the 84, but far, far behind the Javelin's range. But being light, it can be fired at a considerable angle, which can come in handy in urban fights, when troops fire from upper floors of a building onto vehicles in the streets. And unlike the 84, it's got a proper anti-tank capability. Most anti-armor weapons slam into the target. NLAW 2 has that mode. Against basically unarmored targets, troops are instructed to use direct attack mode. But if the target is an armored vehicle, then the operator selects the overflight top attack mode. That does the following. The missile gets instructions to fly a meter above its normal flight trajectory. A proximity fuse then detects when the vehicle is underneath it and activates the warhead. The warhead itself is a shaped charge, which means the explosive is arranged so it compresses and shapes a metal liner into a projectile, whilst pushing it at great velocity. Since the attack on the vehicle comes from above, and since pretty much all armored vehicles, tanks included, have thin armor on top, penetration is quite likely. Still, it's not guaranteed. Some extra care does need to be taken when targeting a vehicle with the top attack mode. The operator has to keep in mind the rocket needs enough clearance to overfly the target and not accidentally crash itself into it. Structures on vehicles may also trigger the warhead prematurely, or they may even cause the rocket to crash into them. Uneven terrain and long-range engagement may cause the missile to fly too low and hit the target directly. Flying too high is usually a lesser issue, as the warhead is powerful enough to deal with such situations. The graph shown pertains to the penetration ability of a generic modern shaped charge. Even if NLAW's shaped charge, due to its short length, is less effective, it would still be likely to penetrate a few hundred millimeters of armor, even if activated 2 meters above an armored surface. Virtually no tank today could prevent penetration of its top surfaces. Top armor is very thin on tanks. If tank makers would try armoring the top surfaces the way side surfaces are protected, tanks would easily weigh double. So it's a cool way to achieve great penetration even with a fairly small rocket. But it's not as reliable and thus as effective as the Javelin. That massive price of the Javelin does bring some undeniable benefits. The Javelin missile itself has a smart seeker sensor which keeps the target in its crosshairs from just before the missile is launched to the moment of impact. Since the seeker has a fairly wide field of view, the missile is free to fly trajectories that aren't necessarily straight. The Javelin has 2 modes of attack. The direct attack flight mode has the missile climb out a little bit before it glides down at a very shallow angle until impact. If a target is very well armored or perhaps mostly behind some sort of obstacle, then the operator might select the top attack mode. The missile flies a few times higher and keeps altitude until the last several hundred yards. Then it dives down on the target at a fairly steep angle. That way it will hit the roof surfaces of targets, which are, as mentioned, generally much less armored. The Javelin has a much longer reach than the NLAW, mostly thanks to the bigger rocket motor and guidance method which can fully utilize the missile's physical reach. The Javelin's warhead is also bigger. It has to be, as its angle of attack even on the roof of the vehicles is closer to 50 degrees rather than 90 degrees like with NLAW, so it has to fight through thicker armor, relatively speaking. As the Javelin is a bigger missile, it can afford to have a more complex warhead. In fact, the Javelin has the main shaped charge warhead and a precursor warhead. The latter is there to activate the reactive armor tiles on vehicles, so the main warhead has less effective armor to go through. The NLAW's warhead, while it doesn't have a precursor, is still effective enough, precisely due to its 90-degree angle of attack. Vehicles have much less of their top surfaces covered with reactive armor tiles, and even if a tile is hit, NLAW's warhead is likely to punch through both the tile and the thin layer of metal beneath by sheer brute force. As the Javelin missile is larger, its shaped charge is longer and can likely penetrate armor, which is equivalent to a steel plate some 8 times the warhead's diameter. That multiplier is usually quoted as the apex of current mass-use shaped charge effectiveness. So actual penetrating power of the Javelin is likely somewhere between 800 and 1000 mm of steel, which is well above what vehicles have as their topside armor, even when the less efficient attack angle is accounted for. The Javelin's warhead is heavier than NLAW's, so it's a little bit more effective even against area targets. But the F variant of the Javelin adds a multi-purpose capability to the warhead with a fragmenting steel case. The single biggest advantage the Javelin has over the NLAW is probably its targeting ability, which really enables it to transform much of its theoretical reach into effective lethal range. The NLAW comes with a dedicated sight, but it's really a simple sight, even weaker than ones used on modern assault rifles. Naturally, that's due to the basically unguided round. It doesn't make sense to invest in a sight that could spot targets a mile away. NLAW's sight offers a mere 2.5 times magnification, and its small diameter lens won't do wonders for image clarity. While the reticle inside the sight is illuminated so it can be used at night, actual usability of the whole NLAW system at night or against targets obscured with fog or smoke is limited. Human eyesight at night can vary greatly. Depending on whether there's a full moon or cloud cover or even outside light sources, the actual distance at which an NLAW operator will be able to track a target is also going to vary greatly. It could be just a few hundred yards. Furthermore, the eye needs time to adjust to darkness, for at least several minutes, but up to half an hour for maximum viewing distance. If some lights appear periodically during nighttime, the operator may never get his eyesight fully adjusted. The sight itself is compatible with using night vision goggles, so if the soldier has those, he can look through the night vision system into the sight and extend his reach at night to the full range of the NLAW. Of course, night vision has to be procured separately. But even night vision goggles will not see through fog or smoke. Smoke in particular is the usual decoy of choice in warfare, with many vehicles having smoke dispensers for creating curtains of smoke. So surprise initial attacks by the NLAW would have better chances of catching their targets unprotected by smoke. And due to the small and weak sight, it's likely that the NLAW operator would also have to use a more powerful set of binoculars actually searching for targets. The Javelin system bypasses pretty much all of those issues by using superior optics and sensors. While the initial variant from the late 1990s had somewhat limited reach, today's Javelin is quite potent. The Javelin uses a separate targeting module called the Command Launch Unit. It has several modes of operation and is used to scan the surroundings and find potential threats. Its best feature is the thermal camera. Coupled with decent amplification, it enables some threats to be identified up to 2.5 miles away. As it uses a thermal sensor, it not only sees just as well in darkness, but almost as well in fog and through most smoke cover types. Its limitations come at dawn and at dusk, when ambient temperature is closer to target temperature. The Command Launch Unit, as it's detachable, is often used just to survey the surroundings. Having a Javelin system within an infantry platoon can be a great asset for the whole unit, not just for the anti-armor role. Of course, there are limitations. It's battery powered and there usually aren't enough batteries to keep it on most of the time. Plus, the system needs time to cool down the thermal sensor, which can take up to 3 minutes. But generally speaking, when a third party spots a target, the Javelin needs to be set up, which is more complicated than with NLAW. Several minutes may be needed to fire a missile if the system was not prepared beforehand. NLAW prep time is under half a minute. So the NLAW is better suited when you need to react quickly to a new nearby threat. Indeed, the Javelin has greater limitations when it comes to use. In practice, it also means the Javelin isn't really meant to be fired from high angles. It's not as well suited to close fights in urban surroundings. While it also has a soft launch motor just like NLAW, which ejects the round away from the operator before the main rocket motor ignites, it requires a bigger safe area around the operator. The NLAW can be fired from a room of virtually any size, even with other soldiers near but not behind the operator. The Javelin is also quite a bit heavier and bulkier. It's thus not as easy to manipulate and can wear out a soldier over long distances. That weight means the Javelins, unlike NLAWs, are usually utilized in specialized teams. While a single person can carry and operate a Javelin, usually a 2 or even a 3-man team is designated to use and carry multiple missiles. NLAWs are distributed more like RPGs, with certain soldiers within a squad carrying one round. The Javelin is simply a more complex system. There's a bunch of steps to learn, indicators to memorize, there's more maintenance needed, and so on. The maker of the NLAW says that a soldier can learn to use it within an hour, which means that an untrained person might learn the overall use basics within a day or so. But the Javelin training takes longer. The US Army Javelin training program lasts for 10 workdays. Of course, in urgent situations and with well-motivated students, that can likely be cut down in half. Still, compared to some of the older anti-tank systems, most of the things to learn don't require actual nuanced skill. The Javelin operator spots a vehicle, marks it as target on the command unit, which sends both that data and the range data from the laser rangefinder to the missile. The missile's own imaging infrared seeker verifies it's got the same target locked on, and that's it. The operator presses the trigger. The system doesn't require additional skill to ensure a hit. In theory, if the threat level is high, the operator can run for cover immediately after firing. But in practice, someone will have to watch the target to confirm it was hit. In many instances, it will be the person with a powerful sensor of the CLU. The missile itself is a bit slower than the NLAW, so it may take as much as a half a minute to reach a target at its maximum range. In urban settings or other locations with lots of cover for vehicles, that may be too slow. The target vehicle may get obscured. Obviously, the maximum range of the Javelin will be best utilized out in the open field. At 2.5 miles away, it's unlikely the enemy will even be able to identify a Javelin system. Javelins are usually fired sitting down, prone or kneeling due to their weight. Also, due to the complexity and time needed to use the system, the US Army advises its troops to use it from a kilometer away or more, unless the situation dictates otherwise. The reason being that the enemy is more likely to spot and engage the Javelin firing unit with machine guns from shorter distances. Which is exactly why some countries use both systems. The NLAW was designed for up-close fights. In cities, the NLAW is a much more sensible and probably even a more effective weapon. Similar arguments could be made for rural areas with lots of cover, trees, small hills and so on. But the Javelin is king in more open spaces, which allow longer range engagements. Its smart self-guidance also means it can shoot down helicopters, as per the US Army manual. Unalerted or slow helicopters would be at risk. So both the NLAW and Javelin are good at what they've been designed to do. Ideally, an infantry platoon would have both systems present. And depending on the type of surroundings, one may be a better choice than the other. Cost can be a prohibitive factor when it comes to the Javelin, but if the user has little other systems like tanks, then even Javelins may be very much a cost-efficient way to defend against an incoming armored opponent, especially if someone else is picking up the tab. Before we go, stick around to learn more about that Call of War strategy game. There are over 120 historically accurate units to research, a huge tech tree including nuclear bombs and other secret weapons of the war. Maps too are historically accurate, and different terrain types affect movement and combat. Don't say I didn't warn you. Economy is a big part of the game too. You can even trade resources and enter alliances with other players. Personally, I'd say shrewd diplomacy is crucial in a game like this, if you're to take over the world and win World War II. As said, Binko viewers get an exclusive gift. If you click on the link in the description, you'll get 13,000 gold and 1 month of premium subscription for free. That offer is available for 30 days only though. Hurry up, choose your country and fight your way to world domination. And remember, Binkov may talk about hypothetical wars, but only real peace can bring us all together.